Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 15 of B-Road Ballers, the review series for the hot hatches, old and new, that are featured on GT6. And in this episode we're featuring quite an odd hot hatch on the surface of things. It's the 2002 Toyota Corolla Runx Z Aerotourer. Got one of the weirdest names ever. And what on earth is it doing in a hot hatch list? I mean, it doesn't exactly look like a hot hatch. You wouldn't spot it in a crowd, not unless you already knew what it was, and even then you'd probably just think, oh, it's a Corolla. It's pretty much the definition of bland. If there was ever a car which was more appropriate to paint beige, I haven't heard of it, because it's this. However, I am including it in the series. Why? Well, because actually, this is a very good car. And I'm not even a fan of it, but it is a very good car. And some of you who may have watched my top 10 selection of my personal pick for the top 10 sleeper cars on Gran Turismo, this car was on that list. And out of 1,200 cars, to be on the top 10 on something as niched as a sleeper car list, it has to be a bit special. And it is. Now, this is a front-wheel drive car, probably not too surprising there. It's powered by a 1.8 litre engine, and interestingly, you have the option to either turbo or supercharge it. Now, the supercharger does give you the better overall specs. More power, more PP. And also it's kind of nice to have a supercharger for a change, because the hot hatch market, at least on Gran Turismo 6, is by far and away dominated by turbocharged cars. So to have a supercharger is nice, it makes a difference. Now with said supercharger, this car produces a pretty decent 349 horsepower and a reasonable 231 pound-feet of torque. The power is achieved reasonably high, 8,500 RPM, and the torque is around the mid-range at 5,500 RPM. One of the most surprising things about the car, though, is its weight, because it's not a particularly small car, about the same kind of size as some of the older generation Golfs, but with the full weight loss package, it only weighs 971 kilos. That's seriously light, even for a hot hatch. Especially for a hot hatch that isn't even small. I mean, this is no K car. Now, the power to weight ratio per tonne, thanks to that very low weight, is a pretty decent 359. And the PP, strangely enough, is not as high as I would have personally expected, considering how low the weight is and how decent the power output is. It only sits at 487 PP. But that's actually a really good thing, as I've mentioned in episodes of reviews before, because that means you get all that spec in a lower PP than your rivals. It also means that this car can be very easily down-tuned to the 475 PP region. And that's actually how I have mine set up, and it sits at that region perfectly. It still has well over 300 horsepower. I chose to have the full weight loss package and not down tune it by adding weight, so it is a pure track machine. It's one of the lightest front wheel drive cars in the game, not one of the most powerful, but it has more than enough power to get the job done, and it's very cheap. It's around half the price of something like an Audi S3 or Alfa 147 GTA. It's only a 20 grand car, so the value for money is fantastic. And, as we said before, it was in my top 10 sleeper car list, because it's so much faster than it looks. Now, this is marketed as a hot hatch. How on earth Toyota thought this looked like an acceptable hot hatch, I do not know. The only thing I can assume is that they were actually trying to make it a sleeper. Because if they were actually trying to make this car look hot as a hatch, it didn't work. Because it doesn't. It just looks like a Corolla with a lip wing on the boot. That doesn't make a hot hatch in my book. The performance, however, which is the more important thing, does certainly make this a hot hatch. This hot hatch can wipe the floor with hot hatches with more power, higher PP, higher price, and better looks, like the aforementioned Alfa 147 or Audi S3 for instance. It can give them a fantastic run for their money around the track. Now, I've raced people using this Corolla only once or twice, so some people do have an appreciation for it, which is good to see. But not enough. More people need to appreciate this car. Then again, at the same time, I kind of hope less people appreciate it, because that means that those of us who do appreciate it have the upper hand in online lobbies. Whereas if everyone starts to know about it, it'll happen in the same way as cars like the Suzuki GSX-R4 or Toyota ZZ2 when everyone starts to use it. So to some degree, it would be good to keep this car as kind of a hidden gem of the GT6 lineup. And again, this is one of those cars which I only looked up because of this series. But if you haven't tried the Corolla, give it a go. It's a good, cheap car. And for this episode, that's all. So I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.
Thank you.